Hello and welcome to the Supreme Fertility webinar. Can your genes affect your chances of falling pregnant? Just before we get started, a few housekeeping rules. All microphones and videos are muted, so if you have any questions, you're welcome to submit them in our chat room on the side. And if there is time, I'll answer these at the end of our session or get back to you. You're also welcome to contact me directly at support@supremefertility.co.za. My name is Deborah Langley. I'm a pharmacist, a whole food plant-based nutritionist, a DNA consultant, author and keynote speaker with more than 25 years experience in the field of health and wellness. I've also hosted numerous talks for the Pharmaceutical Society of South Africa, the Gauteng General Practitioners Association, Equilibria School of Life, Geneway, the Pharmacy Show, etc. And I've been a contributor to the Natural Medicine magazine and Oxygen as well. And I'm also the face behind the popular Instagram feed at plant-based to go. But after a personal experience with my third baby that created quite an upset in my life, I decided to dedicate more time, research and understanding into learning more about fertility and DNA and how simple dietary and lifestyle changes can help solve fertility issues and create healthy babies. Today, I'm going to explain step by step what you can do to increase your chances of falling pregnant. I'll also be uploading some links and more information for you to download as we go along, so keep watching the chat box on the right hand side. I want to start by asking a question. It's how many of you have personally or known of a friend or family member that has struggled to fall pregnant, had recurrent miscarriages, or even given birth to a baby with some kind of birth defect? Now, fertility is a very real and common problem. As young people, we live in fear of getting pregnant, and then as we age and get older, this changes, and many of us live in fear of never ever falling pregnant, having babies and hearing the sound of laughter running down our corridors at home as we grow older. I met my husband when I was quite young. We fell in love and he proposed and we got married, and within it wasn't too long after that, it was a few months actually, I was one of the lucky ones, and I gave birth to our first daughter. Her name is Melissa Chelsea. She's actually quite grown up now, 23 years old and a teacher. And about 2 years after that, her little younger sister came along. This is Kelsey, and she's also in her final year of engineering. But for a lot of people out there, this whole process is not as easy as that. And this is Samantha, a 39-year-old female who followed pretty much the same pathway as I did. She also met her husband, they fell in love, he proposed, and they got married. And a few years later, when they wanted to start a family, she was diagnosed with infertility of unknown cause. And what Samantha had just done was bought herself an expensive ticket onto the world's largest and most emotional roller coaster ride, the Infertility. I quickly want to just show you the short video, which really explains in a nutshell how conception takes place, how remarkable and miraculous it is, and how sensitive the whole process is.
Fertilization is the epic story of a single sperm facing incredible odds to unite with an egg and form a new human life. It is the story of all of us. During sexual intercourse, about 300 million sperm enter the vagina. Soon afterward, millions of them will either flow out of the vagina or die in its acidic environment. However, many survive because of the protective elements provided in the fluid surrounding them. Next, the sperm must pass through the cervix, an opening into the uterus. Usually, it remains tightly closed, but here the cervix is open for a few days while the woman ovulates. The sperm swim through the cervical mucus, which is thinned to a more watery consistency for easier passage. Once inside the cervix, the sperm continues swimming toward the uterus, though millions will die trying to make it through the mucus. Some sperm remain behind, caught in the folds of the cervix, but they may later continue the journey as a backup to the first group. Inside the uterus, muscular uterine contractions assist the sperm on their journey toward the egg. However, resident cells from the woman's immune system, mistaking the sperm for foreign invaders, destroy thousands more. Next, half the sperm head for the empty fallopian tube, while the other half swim toward the tube containing the unfertilized egg. Now, only a few thousand remain. Inside the fallopian tube, tiny cilia push the egg toward the uterus. To continue, the sperm must surge against this motion to reach the egg. Some sperm get trapped in the cilia and die. During this part of the journey, chemicals in the reproductive tract cause the membranes covering the heads of the sperm to change. As a result, the sperm become hyperactive, swimming harder and faster toward their destination. At long last, the sperm reach the egg. Only a few dozen of the original 300 million sperm remain. The egg is covered with a layer of cells called the corona radiata. The sperm must push through this layer to reach the outer layer of the egg, the zona pellucida. When sperm reach the zona pellucida, they attach to specialized sperm receptors on the surface, which triggers their acrosomes to release digestive enzymes, enabling the sperm to burrow into the layer. Inside the zona pellucida is a narrow, fluid-filled space just outside the egg cell membrane. The first sperm to make contact will fertilize the egg. After a perilous journey and against incredible odds, a single sperm attaches to the egg cell membrane. Within a few minutes, their outer membranes fuse and the egg pulls the sperm inside. This event causes changes in the egg membrane that prevent other sperm from attaching to it. Next, the egg releases chemicals that push other sperm away from the egg and create an impenetrable fertilization membrane. As the reaction spreads outward, the zona pellucida hardens, trapping any sperm unlucky enough to be caught inside. Outside the egg, sperm are no longer able to attach to the zona pellucida. Meanwhile, inside the egg, the tightly packed male genetic material spreads out. A new membrane forms around the genetic material, creating the male pronucleus. Inside, the genetic material reforms into 23 chromosomes. The female genetic material, awakened by the fusion of the sperm with the egg, finishes dividing, resulting in the female pronucleus, which also contains 23 chromosomes. As the male and female pronuclei form, spiderweb-like threads, called microtubules, pull them toward each other. The two sets of chromosomes join together, completing the process of fertilization. At this moment, a unique genetic code arises, instantly determining gender, hair color, eye color, and hundreds of other characteristics. This new single cell, the zygote, is the beginning of a new human being. And now the cilia in the fallopian tube gently sweep the zygote toward the uterus, where he or she will implant in the rich uterine lining, growing and maturing for the next 9 months until ready for birth.
So you can see how truly remarkable and sensitive the whole process
Fertilization.
of fertilization is. We've got a lot of material to cover in this hour, and now what I want to do is quickly just run through what we're going to be looking at. I'm going to have a quick overview: what is infertility, what causes it, a bit more about the Supreme Fertility Program, what is the role of DNA in fertility, who is the Supreme Fertility Program aimed at, what are the benefits, and how do you get started. So to kick off, let's just answer the question, what is infertility? Now, the World Health Organization defines infertility as the failure to achieve a clinical pregnancy after 12 months or more of regular, unprotected sexual intercourse. And if you are younger than 35 years old, you're classified as being infertile if you're unable to conceive after 1 year of trying. If you're older than 35, after 6 months of trying, and older than 39 after 3 months of trying. Now, infertility is a lot more common than you may at first expect. There are, with 1 in 6 couples having trouble conceiving. If I think back, my mom had me, I think, when she was about 22 years old, and I had my daughters when I was pretty much slightly older than that. And I think that's probably partially one of the problems why the incidence of infertility is rising and increasing so much in today's times, because most couples are starting to have families much later than their parents did. And maybe this is potentially one of the problems we don't really know at all. But did you know that infertility, a third of the time the problem lies with the male, a third of the time it lies with the female, and a third of the time there's problems with both parties. And that everyone is very quick and easy to blame the female when there is a problem in fertility, but this is not necessarily the case. And that's why we look at both parties and have a role, both partners. The whole Supreme Fertility program is aimed at looking at both partners. So if we quickly take a look at the number of sperm that males produce, it's about 50,000 to 60,000 per minute when they hit puberty. And to conceive naturally, you've got to have a really good sperm count. The sperm has to be the right shape, and it's got to be really agile and mobile. And there's a lot of things that can affect either the count, the morphology, or the motility of the sperm in general. And if we look at this little slide over here, just how research has shown that sperm concentration, which is measured in spermatozoa per milliliter, has declined by about 1.4% per year on average. Since the early 1970s, this is more or less what it looked like today. And that calculates about a decrease of over 60%. And even the sperm morphology, which is how a normal sperm looks and acts, has also been in decline over the last few years. I love this little slide. It illustrates perfectly the number of eggs when it comes to a female. If you picture this gumball machine like this, when you're young and at your prime, it's jam-packed full of gumballs. And as time progresses, when you get older, the number of gumballs reduces until there's only a very few left, and they're all old and stale. And that's exactly how a female's eggs decline in number as well. At birth, a female has approximately 2 million eggs. And then when they reach puberty, this is decreased in number to about 400,000. At the age of 30 to 100,000. And by the age of 45 to 55, they have no eggs left at all. Now, to conceive, you have to have a regular and normal menstrual cycle. And we could probably say a normal cycle lasts on average 28 days, although this can vary from 28 to 35 days. And ovulation usually takes place around day 14 of the cycle, with peak fertility being from around about day 12 to 14, and maybe lasting for another day or two thereafter. Now, a single late or missed period does not mean you have fertility issues. But if it's a recurring problem and it happens every single month, which makes tracking your ovulation extremely different, you need to go and seek professional help. Particularly, this can happen in people suffering from eating disorders like anorexia, those with cancer that are on certain medications, on different kinds of drugs, etc. There's quite a few more things that you can look at in a little bit more detail later on as well. But what are risk factors that can increase your potential chances of being infertile? And there's a lot of different things that we can look at there. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that right now, but there's just a few of them. You have to have regular menstrual cycles, a history of cancer, too much alcohol and smoking, sexually transmitted diseases, obesity, your age, etc., to name but a few. There's a whole lot of other things as well. If you're looking more medically, we're looking at things like endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, pelvic inflammatory disease, any recurrent UTI infections, any uterine fibroids, cysts, etc., all can have a role to play. So what else can affect your fertility? Your diet has an extremely important role to play. Now, everyone always pays attention and wants to avoid toxins and things in their diet, but what is equally important is that you are providing the right amount of vitamins, nutrients, and phytominerals that your body needs to complete and undergo all these complicated biological processes that have to take place. If we can look at that little video that we've just seen, you can see how intricate each and everything is. And if everything is not working normally, all kinds of problems can exist. So your diet plays a very important role. The amount of folate that you have in your diet is critical. Inflammation, your hormone levels, and any kinds of infections or other kinds of immunity issues that you might have can also have a role to play there. Now, why is your hormone balance so important? Because we know that if you have imbalanced hormones, you're going to pick up weight. You can have irregular periods, never mind about a decreased sex drive. If you're not having sex on a regular basis, you're going to have a much lower chance of falling pregnant in the first place, because that's really the starting point there as well. What if someone like Samantha Blue, when they climb on this emotional roller coaster ride, and what kind of options do they have? Well, they first need to rule out any physical abnormalities, have some blood tests done, and then the doctor could potentially prescribe something like Clomid to assist with ovulation. Now, if that doesn't work, they can try artificial insemination, and then they start looking at things like in vitro or some more holistic and alternative methods like supplements, diet, exercise, etc. But what does a typical IVF treatment cost? If we look at that a bit closer, it does vary from practice to practice, but this will just give you an overall indication more or less of what costs can be expected. If you're looking at the consultation, it's about 2,200 Rand. A basic female and male blood tests are in the region of about 4,000. A semen analysis is 1,700. And then you have other procedures like your artificial insemination, which can be about 7,500, sperm wash, 1,600, artificial insemination donor, about 13,000, and then you've got your IVF treatment that starts down here from about 61,000, and for the total full package, it can increase and be as much as 91,000 in total. And the terrible sad thing about this IVF procedures is that it's so extremely costly and there are absolutely no guarantees at all. There is only about a 50% success rate. And this means that women may need to undergo more than one cycle of treatment. And in many cases, they need several, sometimes with conception only taking place after the 9th IVF attempt. And success rates in IVF also decline once patients reach the age of 35. And this is because the quality of a woman's eggs deteriorates as she grows older. And studies have also shown that women who are in better physical and emotional shape also have a better chance of having a successful IVF treatment. Another downside to these IVF procedures is that medical aids don't pay for them. The argument is that it's not a life-threatening medical condition like heart disease, for example. If you're one of the lucky ones, your medical aid might cover some of the cost of infertility procedures, but you would be one of the lucky ones. If we're looking at these exorbitant costs, it really is unreachable for most of the population in general. So what does someone like Samantha then do? Do you just accept your fate and say that there is no hope for you, you don't have that kind of money, so you're not really going to have babies or children ever? Or are there more affordable options out there that you could potentially experiment with? And there is. That's where DNA testing comes into play. It's a new and it's an emerging field of medicine. And what makes Supreme Fertility so unique is the DNA, because that is the key ingredient to the success of the whole program. That's what the testing does provide. It allows us to provide you with more information as to what is going to be right for you as an individual. There is also no guarantees, however, because not everyone is going to win with this either. But what it does do is increase your chances. The more balls you have in the lottery, the luckier you can get, as they will say. In general, it is estimated that approximately 50% of infertility cases are caused by genetic issues. Now, the good news about this is you can do something about that, because when you're looking at your diet and your environment and your lifestyle and the supplements that you're taking, you can ultimately affect your epigenetic environment. And I want to get a bit more into that now, but I think I want to just start off by giving you a little bit of a background into what is this DNA and fertility link, so that you can maybe just understand it a little bit better. Now, we all have 46 chromosomes. We get 23 from each of our parents. And if you take one of those chromosomes and you unwind it, it looks very much like this, like the rungs of a ladder. And you'll see all these little letters scattered throughout the bottom. A and T always pair together, and G and C always go together. And that's what we call base pairs. We've got over 3 billion of these base pairs in our body. And the A stands for adenine, and the T for thymine, the C for cytosine, and the G for guanine. Now, every 3 of those base pairs forms what we call a codon, and every codon codes an amino acid. Now, the amino acids all bind together to make proteins, and all different kinds of proteins get made wherever and whenever they are needed to provide different functions. So you can see sometimes they make lactase, which breaks down the sugar in milk, collagen, whatever it is, or it could be to potentially make proteins that are needed that affect some kind of some phase of your fertility process in general. Now, because we're all human beings, we are 99.9% identical and exactly the same. But it's that 0.1% difference that makes each of us so unique. And that's what we look at Supreme Fertility when we look at your DNA. We want to see what those differences are and how could they be affecting your chances of falling pregnant. Now, the DNA testing that we do looks at different positions of your DNA strand. If, for instance, at a particular position of your DNA strand, you should have an A and a T sitting there to produce a certain protein that has a particular role to play in fertility, you might have a G and a C. And that's what we call a SNP. Now, SNP is short for single nucleotide polymorphism. And that single little letter change could be the difference between somebody being fertile and somebody else being really infertile. Now, we can't really do much about your genes because you're born with those genes, and your genes will never change. So you're never going to have to retest these particular genes ever again, because it is not going to change. But what does change, however, is your environment. Now, if your environment is healthy, your diet is really rich in nutrients, you're exercising, etc., you are potentially going to be really fertile, even with good or bad DNA. But you may even have good genes. And if your environment is really toxic, you're eating really a lot of rubbish and processed foods in your diet, with insufficient nutrients, getting no exercise, etc., with DNA, you could still become infertile. Now, your body at different times, well, you can't, as I say, you can't really change your DNA, but what happens is your DNA is like a light switch, and it gets switched on and switched off at different times, and different times of the day and different times of your life to perform certain functions. Now, different genes can be switched on and switched off, and whether they are on or off can affect the process that they are meant to be having in your body. One more slide that I quickly want to look at before we get into a little bit more detail about that. You might hear the term nutrigenomics. Now, all the food and the nutrients that you take into your body plays a role on your DNA and how it expresses itself, and that's what we call nutrigenomics. But your DNA itself also affects how the nutrients are absorbed from the food that you are eating. And some people have problems absorbing iron, for instance, or whatever it may be from their diet, and they need to supplement on a regular basis to help correct that process. Now, I have mentioned that your DNA does not change and you will never have to retest it, but it does regenerate and repair continuously throughout your life. But there are various things in your environment and inside your body as well that can cause DNA damage. And we've been looking in a nutshell, it could potentially be things like pollution, cigarette smoking, stress, radiation, your diet. Now, I want to emphasize again here, not only avoiding toxic products, but we want to provide our body with the right amount of vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, etc. that we need there. Certain medications, there's a lot of other things as well, but that's just to give you an idea of what can be expected there. Now, a little bit more about the sperm. What we call oxidative stress can damage the DNA of the sperm and prevent it from fertilizing an egg. Now, oxidative stress is known to contribute to defective sperm production by also having a negative impact on the concentration, the motility, and the function, and this adversely affects the fusion that is needed for the whole fertilization process, etc., to occur. So we've already said we cannot do anything about your DNA. So if we test it and you've got good genes or you've got bad genes, we cannot do anything about it. So that's why this quote is quite evident when you start researching and learning more about DNA, and you'll see it coming to the front quite often. Genetics loads the gun, but it's the environment that pulls the trigger. What I want to cover now a little bit more is just a little bit more detail. What is the Supreme Fertility Program? What is it, and how does it all piece together to help increase your chances of having a baby? Now, it's a very exciting initiative, and it's first of its kind in the field of infertility in South Africa. And it's made up of various processes, but it's a complete step-by-step program that walks both the doctor and the patient through this emotional journey. Now, the researchers have done all the hard work. They put hours into reading through the latest clinical trials and fertility studies to help improve your odds of falling pregnant. The research has been done to try and provide you with the optimal conditions that will help make conception possible. And it also enhances the success rate of assisted conception procedures like IVF if you have to go this route eventually. And the good news is there's absolutely no side effects, and the recommendation is going to improve the overall health and vitality of both parties in the process. So there is absolutely nothing to lose as well. And it may even potentially save you bucket loads of money if you cannot afford expensive IVF treatments, or you might potentially not even need it at all. So what is this program made of? It is 3 different parts. The first part is the optimal supplement range, which have been spent quite a lot of research. They contain particular nutrients that help to enhance the whole fertile environment, etc. There are checklists that can be followed to make sure that every step is taken along the way. And then we've also got this patient booklet that has step-by-step information for both partners in a lot of detail about what dietary things to look out for, what drugs you may be using that could be reducing your chances of falling pregnant. So it's got dietary, lifestyle changes, very, very much things to look at like that as well. So I'd really recommend you invest in a copy of that as well. And then the crux of the program is the DNA testing. And this is where we look at the male and the female DNA, and we look for SNPs that have been scientifically proven to affect fertility in some kind of way. Now, the whole Supreme Fertility package is a 3 to 6 month program. And the reason behind this is that it takes the sperm and the eggs approximately 3 months to reach maturity. Now, what happens with most people is they make changes to their diet and lifestyle, or they start taking supplements for very short periods of time. And this is not really going to provide the body with enough time or the resources to correct any imbalances that may exist, because people stop taking the program or resort back to their old dietary changes before they see the improvements happening. So what benefits could you potentially expect? As I've already mentioned, it's a step-by-step program that does walk you through a variety of issues that could be affecting your fertility that you may not even have known about before. It's also very researched, and up-to-date research has been done, which also saves you hours and hours of trying to do that for yourself. It is quite affordable when you're looking at in perspective of those expensive IVF treatments. You could probably put together the pennies to undergo this kind of treatment for a couple of months. And what it does is it creates the optimal conditions to allow conception to take place. And it's also going to save you time running around from all different kinds of things, learning about diet, lifestyle, nutrition, etc., researching all kinds of things, because we've done all this research and stuff for you. Who is the Supreme Fertility Program aimed at? Now, Supreme Fertility is aimed at couples that have been diagnosed with unexplained infertility, when also in couples where all physical causes of infertility have been excluded. It's also extremely important for couples that are still planning on starting a family, because for that healthy sperm and eggs to mature, as I've already mentioned, it does take about 3 months. So you want to make sure that you're going to have the healthiest eggs in the sperm, the healthiest pregnancy, and ultimately the healthiest baby in the long run. Also ideal for couples planning on having IVF procedures, because as I've already mentioned there as well, it can help to increase the success rate of the IVF procedure in general. And then again, in people that have had personal or recurrent family histories of miscarriages or infertility, and in those where age is becoming a problem or cost is a factor there as well. And what I want to do now is just share a little story that I wanted to share with you. When I was 37 years old, I was pregnant with my third daughter. It was a bit unplanned because my youngest daughter was I think she was about 10 or 11 at that stage. So it originally was quite a shock that I had to get my mind around this whole concept. And then the whole family was quite excited, and we were looking forward to welcoming this new addition into our family, and we went away on holiday. And in the January of 2010, it was the Soccer World Cup year, you'll all remember it quite well. And I particularly remember going to the gynae for my checkup. Before we left on holiday, everything was fine, and I'd come back and all my amniotic fluid had dried up. And the doctor knew that something was drastically wrong, and he didn't know what it was, and they couldn't see what it was, because you can't see what's happening inside without the amniotic fluid, because they need the fluid to see what's happening there. It was quite a journey for me, an emotional journey as well. And it was the 29th of January. I remember lying on my back, staring up at the ceiling with all these white flickering lights, and my hands were sweating and my heart was beating loudly. And I was extremely nervous. I'm sure everyone could sense it around me. They were busy wheeling me down the passage on the way to the operating theatre. I was about to give birth to my third daughter. And we named her Kia Tennille. And then they brought it to me wrapped in a little standard hospital towel. You might be familiar with it, the blue and white hospital towels. And as I held it in my arms and I opened up the towel, I realized that Kia Tennille would not live for very long, because she was born with an extremely rare condition, which I'm going to show you a picture initially. But before I get to that picture, when I was diagnosed, fell pregnant initially, what the doctor put me on was just a standard folic acid tablet and a multinatal vitamin, such as this Pregnavit, which you can see here. But as I told you, when they brought Kia Tennille to me and I opened up that hospital towel, she was born with an extremely rare condition called Serene Amelia, which is mermaid syndrome. So right from the belly button down, her legs were fused together into a tail, just like that of a mermaid. And it was so rare, they had to call in a genetic specialist from the Kloof Hospital to actually come in and make the diagnosis. So while I was at home recovering for a few weeks after that, I did a lot of research, and I was trying to find a reason and a possible cause as to what could have potentially caused this. And there were a few reasons and things that I'd had with my pharmaceutical and my health background. I had all these speculations, and I wanted to go and research further, but there weren't really labs equipped to handle it at that stage. And my husband eventually said to me, we're going to have to move to America, or you're going to have to move on with your life. And that's exactly what I did. And it was a few years after that when I was locuming in a pharmacy with a whole bunch of pharmacists, um, a whole bunch of pharmacists, and they were all speaking about these genetic and these DNA tests that they had done, and it naturally piqued my interest. And I thought it would be a wonderful addition to add into my plant-based practice for my own personal clients to use there as well. But what I first believed in doing is to offer a service like this. You have to have tried out the program yourself before you can really recommend it to somebody else. And that's exactly what I did. So I took my little DNA swab and I sent it off to the labs for testing. And it was about 2 to 3 weeks later, and I got my DNA feedback. And this is actual snapshot of my personal DNA test that you can see here. And I've highlighted these few areas. You'll see my DNA damage. I've got impaired DNA restoration and repairability. And when we look at the methylation, based on the genetic analysis, you have a moderately impaired methylation pathway. Now, looking at that, these little color schemes you'll learn a bit later can vary from very pale yellow through orange, from very light green, light yellow, orange, right down to red if it's a very, very high risk area. And these two particular cases weren't even red. So I didn't really think that it was that much of, really not that much, like so important a role to play there. And if you look a little bit more closer at the results, you'll see under the methylation, this is all the genes that they test for that could affect the methylation pathway. And these two were red, the SHMT gene and the MTHFR A1298C gene. Now, what I want to do it here, just take a little bit of a closer look and explain to you what is the role of that MTHFR gene, and what does it do in the body, and why is it so important. Now, this MTHFR gene methylates folic acid, turning it into methylfolate. And this is an active biochemical process that is needed to start off the whole methylation process. If we look at this little pathway here, you start by putting inactive folate, or this is where you'll take your folic acid tablets, etc., and it moves through this pathway. Here the SHMT gene has a role to play, lower down here the MTHFR gene has a role to play, until that inactive folate is converted into this 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, which is the active form of folate that the body actually uses. Now, folate is extremely important. It has a role in repairing DNA and RNA of damaged cells. It turns genes on and off. It has a role in detoxification, building neurotransmitters in the body, metabolizing hormones, building immune cells, producing energy, and also producing a protective coating on the nerve sheaths, etc. I don't want to go into too much detail there because it can be quite complicated, but in a nutshell, I think that's all you really need to know that's important over here. So what is the role of MTHFR, particularly in fertility when it comes to that? And what we do know, and it has been associated with, is low sperm counts, also with birth defects there as well. What was also quite important at that stage is I was following a plant-based diet and I was taking vitamin B12 supplements, etc. But if you'll see here, this methylfolate is needed to help convert vitamin B12 into the methylated cobalamin, which is also the active form that the body needs to help convert homocysteine into methionine. Now, when you look at my DNA results as well, and you'll see that I had this red MTHFR, which is a high-risk gene. That means I inherited a mutated gene from my mother and my father. So both the SHMT and the MTHFR genes were mutated. And at that stage, I probably didn't have enough methylated vitamin B12 in my body either, as I was not taking the right form of vitamin B12 at that stage because I didn't really know it. So on my DNA feedback sheets, it also recommends some blood tests that you can have done. So I was quite interested and I went to Lancet and had some blood drawn. And then my feedback came back. This is an actual snapshot of my results as well. You'll see my homocysteine levels was 15.3 at that stage. Now, an ideal homocysteine level should be below 6.5. This is even lower than what they tell you on the average range that comes from the blood test. And yeah, if you're looking at my vitamin B12, you see that was also critically low. And both those substances form part of what we call the methylation cycle in the body. Now, because of this, I obviously had a disruption in my methylation cycle, which could potentially lead to fertility problems, etc. Yeah, so I was pretty much expected this could have happened, and this is exactly where the block was at that stage with that gene over there. Now, in general, if we look at the role of methylation and what it does in the body particularly. Now, methylation is an essential biochemical process that virtually takes place in every cell in the body. It also affects how we utilize vitamin B12 and folate, regulates gene expression, also switches genes on and off by adding these methyl groups in the process. It helps us synthesize neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. It's got a role in mood disorders there as well. It processes heavy metals in the body, hormones, and it also helps regulate the hormone activity and the immune system. And when we're looking at infertility or fertility in particular, what role does it have to play there? And when we're looking at the male, it is associated with, well, should I say, impaired methylation is associated with reduced sperm motility, interference in sperm DNA synthesis, lower estradiol levels, abnormal sperm morphology. Now, what that means, this technical term, it refers to the shape of the sperm. And this is what normal sperm should look like on the left-hand side over here. And these are all the various different shapes that could be appearing in one of those different forms as well. And when it comes to the female, impaired methylation is associated with endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, reduced follicle quality, birth defects, and early pregnancy loss. And problems in the methylation cycle can also be associated with high homocysteine levels. And when we're looking at homocysteine in particular, high homocysteine in the body has been associated with anovulation. It's been associated with poor egg maturity, with poor early embryo quality, with spina bifida, with club feet in babies, low birth weight babies, preeclampsia, premature birth, congenital heart disease, miscarriages, as well as spontaneous abortions. So it really gives it quite an increased risk for early pregnancy loss there as well. And it's also associated with placental abruption and an increased risk for placental damage during the pregnancy. It is associated with low sperm motility, with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And when we're looking at my particular case with Kia and the Serene Amelia, could this potentially have been avoided? Now, we can't really answer that question 100% for certain, but what made a lot of sense for me, if we look at this little biochemical process over here as well, I was taking folic acid, which filters in right at the top of the process over here, and it has to get converted into this active folate, which was not happening efficiently because of those two impaired genes over there. So all I really needed to have done was take or supplement folate in this active form right down here in the process, and I could have bypassed this whole faulty part of my DNA pathway there as well. And I could also supplement with methylated cobalamin, which is methylated vitamin B12 over there as well, to bypass this little part of the cycle as well. Now, I'm really glad that I've had these DNA testing done, and I have also tested my eldest daughter, because they're also approaching the age where they also would like to get married and start families in the not too distant future, I presume. I haven't tested the younger one yet because it is quite a costly exercise, but I definitely hope to plan on testing her DNA as well in the next few months. Now, how do we know, or how do you know if you have this mutated MTHFR gene? And the answer is you really do not know, and you will never know unless you have your DNA tested. Now, the good news is a DNA test is super quick, it's super easy, It's painless and there is no blood involved at all. So if you're a bit squeamish and you thought it's going to require some needles, just have to reassure you it's not at all. It's what we call a buccal swab. So we collect some DNA from the inside of your cheek, and it literally takes not more than a minute. So it's super quick and easy. Now, what happens if you have your testing done and you find out that you do have this MTHFR mutation? What does that mean? And as I told you, the good news is you can do something about it. So the very first and most important thing you need to do if you're diagnosed with an MTHFR mutation, you need to clean up your environment. And this is of utmost importance. And it starts by looking at things like all the chemical cleaners and household products and stuff you have around the home. Throw out and substitute wherever possible with more environmentally friendly and organic kind of household cleaners where possible, because this can have a role to play there as well. And if you need to cut out all the refined and processed food from your diet. You need to stop eating sugar-rich food, fizzy cool drinks, etc., things like that. You must cut down on your alcohol intake, because alcohol depletes vitamin B in your body, and vitamin B is the whole complex vitamin Bs. All the different vitamin Bs have a role to play, an essential role to play in the whole methylation process. You need to cut out any smoking, and you need to manage your stress levels. This is also extremely important and also plays a role in the whole methylation cycle and can help imbalance it quite considerably there. If it means that you've got to start taking a 60-minute yoga class every day to help calm your nerves and manage your stress, then sign up. But find ways of managing your stress levels. If you need to go for a walk or breathe deeply, meditate, write in a journal, whatever it may be, then please go ahead and do that as well. You need to look at your weight. You need to look with open eyes. You need to stand in front of the mirror. And if you really are overweight or obese, it can drastically reduce your chances of falling pregnant considerably. And I would really recommend that you go and see a dietitian or your Supreme Fertility healthcare practitioner and have them help and guide you down a pathway that you can reduce your weight back into the healthy range. Probably one of the most important parts to play is you need to take a look at your diet, and you need to start increasing the amount of natural folate in your diet, because the natural folate is the easiest way for the body to use, absorb what it needs, etc. And also, besides that, you're going to be getting the right amount of vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, etc., to improve your whole health in general there as well. And then you have to supplement with the right kind of supplements. Now, what form of folate is best for people that have this MTHFR mutation? Now, folic acid in the standard form, which is usually recommended at about 400 micrograms per day, is not recommended. Folic acid has a long shelf life, it is easily stored, and it's less expensive than other forms of folate supplementation, but it's not recommended for patients with an MTHFR mutation for the following reasons. It's a synthetic compound, and it's not easily utilized by the body at all. It's also got no physiological effect until it has been converted to active folate. Folic acid is also broken down much slower than natural folate, which can lead to a buildup in the body, which has been associated with negative health impacts as well. And then the folate receptors attract folic acid, and this prevents natural folate from entering the cells, which is needed for the biochemical processes to take place. So if you have, or you think you may have, an MTHFR mutation, supplementing with folic acid can create more problems in your folate cycle. So Supreme Fertility recommends taking the active form of folate, which is this 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, or what we call methylated folate, in a daily dose of 400 micrograms daily. And if you have an MTHFR mutation, then this supplement is probably going to be the most important one for you to take. Now, methylated folate is the active form of folate that sets off the whole methylation process and allows the body to give and receive methyl groups that switch these different genes on and off as and when they are needed. So you've heard all about the role that DNA fertility plays, and you might be interested, but what's the next step? What do you have to do to start off this whole process? We need to start by collecting both yours and your partner's DNA swabs, and this will get sent off to the lab where they'll take a closer look. It will generally take about 2 to 3 weeks for them to run through your whole DNA and take a careful look there as well. When the lab does receive your samples, you will receive an email to fill out a lifestyle questionnaire, and I recommend that you fill this out in as much detail as possible. The more detail you fill out there, the easier you make it for your healthcare practitioner to give you the right recommendations and advice to make the right changes, etc., that are needed. Then you need to start with the Supreme Fertility supplement ranges as soon as possible to make sure that you're getting all the vitamins, minerals, nutrients that your body needs to help create this optimum fertile environment. And you need to continue with this for at least 3 to 6 months. I would also encourage you to invest in a copy of our Supreme Fertility patient booklet, which is step-by-step, covers everything that you need to know, that she needs to know, that he needs to know, things to look out for, dietary changes to make. There's even a few recipes, things, etc. in there as well. And about 2 to 3 later, you will receive an email that your DNA test results are ready. This is a snapshot of what you can expect to see from these results as well. And then your healthcare practitioner will contact you. You need to schedule a feedback session. This can be done with a Supreme Fertility healthcare practitioner, or if you don't have one, the Supreme Fertility can allocate one to you there to do that for you as well. So if you stick to the program and it works for you, we'll be right there to help you welcome a new little baby into your home in a few months' time. Now, we have reached the end of our session, and I hope that you found it both enjoyable and informative, and that it's given you new hope with steps that you can take to help yourself along this emotional roller coaster ride as well. Please remember to check the sidebar for our free MTHFR guide that you can download to learn more, and some other useful resources that we have for you there as well. Okay. So your biological clock is ticking. Don't wait a day longer, because every single day you wait, your chances are getting might be getting less and less and less as you go along. So please reach out to our Supreme Fertility team and let us walk this whole journey with you. As I mentioned previously, you can reach me at support@supremefertility.co.za, or you're welcome to send an email to info@supremefertility.co.za, or type in www.supremefertility.co.za into your search bar to learn a bit more there as well. So thank you very much for joining us, and please remember to contact me if you have any further questions. I look forward to working with many of you in the near future. Thanks for dialing in.